Last week, in the wake of a horrific natural disaster, a group of avowedly Christian leaders released a statement condemning homosexuality. I wish I could say this is surprising. Given the length of the statement, I will take them at their word that it was composed before Hurricane Harvey's landfall. But the date of its release is either shockingly tone-deaf or opportunistically cruel. I suspect both. The timing of the so-called Nashville Statement of course brings to mind the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The destruction of Sodom is popularly taken as the archetype of the Lord's rage against homosexuality. In this interpretation, it connects something like a natural disaster with God's judgment on anyone who is not cisgendered and straight. I find it hard to believe the pastors gathered in Nashville did not consider the association between this story and the devastation in Houston. Like Jude, they hoped the audience will draw their own connections between sexual sins of Sodom and a devastating flood, even if, like Jude, they would not say so directly. Some of their colleagues were more forthright. The story of Sodom's destruction remains the touchstone of scriptural arguments against an equitable understanding of human sexuality. There are other, clearer and more explicit, passages that are weaponized against our queer family. Still, when I engage in discussions about the Bible and sex, I always expect that the 19th chapter of Genesis will be the first citation offered. Thus far, I have never been disappointed. For precisely this reason, I want to walk through the valley of Sodom, to search through the ruins of her twin cities, and see what the Lord's judgment can teach us about being the people of God, right now, in a moment when it seems everything is falling apart. I'll be sifting through dust and ashes, so I hope you'll understand if my thoughts are fragmentary, ill-ordered, and offer more questions than answers. As the people of Houston know far better than I, it is difficult to pick up the pieces when a city has been ravaged. Progressive Christians usually turn aside on the road to Sodom. It's understandable. The ruins are deeply associated with an aggressively homophobic theology. It's as if there's something toxic left in the soil. It often seems our best bet is to avoid them entirely, or explain them away. The common detour around Sodom starts at the Oaks of Mamre. It bears a signpost marked hospitality. It is the road I and most of my companions take. We'll say that the Genesis 19 is really about Middle Eastern commitments to hospitality. There may be some truth to this. But on the whole it seems a weak argument. Discussing hospitality wherein people are yelling damnation feels a bit like arguing over flatware arrangements with someone who's trying to stab you in the face. As an Episcopalian, I have a great deal to say about the arrangement of flatware. But it may not be what's needed now. We'll avoid the hospitality road for the moment. It may cross our path again as we continue on. We'll sit a moment at Mamre. We'll watch Abraham look across the heat of the desert. We'll see him call out to strangers. It's clear from the text he has no idea who they are. What happens next goes so far beyond what we call hospitality that it must belong to another category entirely. Under the sun, without water, the lives of these men are in danger. Abraham doesn't invite them to his house. He begs them. He humbles himself to get them in his door. He gives curds, milk, water, the finest calf he owns, and cakes. He washes their feet, and gives them a place of rest, while he, a man of 90, stands. Though it is possible that, as near centenarian recovering from a recent circumcision, he stands not from generosity but discomfort. His generosity has its flaws. It is not without its patriarchal overtones. After all, it is his servant who slaughters and cooks the calf, and his octogenarian wife who bakes the cakes, both on his orders. But even these failings cannot entirely eclipse the magnitude of his sacrifice. This is not a story of a wealthy man's charity. This is the story of a wealthy man begging unknown vagabonds to take the very best his house can offer, and accepting discomfort, so they can find rest. I consider our responses in the wake of Harvey, my own Milqueo's giving, or the now infamous pastor who locked his sanctuary, declaring, "No one asked me for help." I compare them to the 4 Houston mosques that immediately opened their doors to receive refugees. It's hard not to cringe and think that some of Abraham's children have held closer to his example than others. Abraham and the men speak. There are promises given. Laughter is shared. In that moment Abraham suddenly sees, and knows, that he stands in the presence of God. Abruptly, 2 of the men stand and walk away. The third speaks. How great the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah! How very great their sin! I must go down and see what